All right. Hi, welcome to the ABP Podcast, which ABP stands for Awesome Blossom Possum. I am Brennan Boyer, the usual editor, and now part of the host with our wonderful... That's when you say the name.
Myself.
Yeah.
Keli Pennington.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Brennan.
How are you?
Good. Yeah, it's a beautiful day outside, so you can't beat that.
Yeah. So, as I'm supposed to ask, what is your name, school year, major, and where are you from, and Enneagram type?
Okay. Name, Keli Pennington. School year, who knows? Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've never actually left school in a way, right? Because even the jobs I have
This is going to be a long one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm like...
Sorry, I know I need to stop.
No. I mean, that's perfect.
School. Okay, not in school, but I've also never left school. So a millionth grade. I studied communication and theology when I was a student here at Greenville, and then went on to get my MDiv at Duke. So all things theology and Bible. And then I grew up in the Peoria area.
You're from Peoria?
I know. Good old
I lived
Central.
in Peoria for a bit. I hated it.
Oh.
Did you go to Peoria Christian at all?
No, I didn't. So if you
Did you know people that go to Peoria Christian?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I got nothing against people who went to Peoria Christian. You may have noticed I said
Peoria.
Most days. I said Peoria area because I lived in a subdivision out in the country. So I was like 13 miles from Peoria, but then I went to...
Like around Groveland?
No, other direction.
Sorry.
Other direction. Gotcha. So my mailing address is Hannah City. But I went to a super, super small high school, Elmwood. But I didn't live in Elmwood. I didn't live in Peoria. I lived halfway between both. So we just say Peoria area, easy landmark in Illinois.
When I was a kid, I lived in Groveland and went to Peoria Christian and had grandparents that lived in Peoria. And yeah, so it's
all
always
the Peoria
interesting to hear the
connections.
Peoria.
Oh, yeah.
So do you believe that somebody can be sorted into an Enneagram type?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think yes and no. I think any kind of personality sorter is always going to break down, right? It's like using a metaphor for God. It can help us understand a part, but it will never fully capture. A metaphor can never fully capture God. So too, I don't think an Enneagram type can ever fully capture who we are. I don't think there are simply 9 kinds of people, right? I think we're all made way too uniquely for that. But I do think what I find the function of the Enneagram to be is that it can help us understand key elements about ourselves. I think particularly healthy versus unhealthy tendencies we may have, why we may have those tendencies, and then hopefully, right, how we might be able to lean more into the healthy versus the unhealthy.
Yeah, so far, we've only been talking for couple minutes, and there's so many things to where it's just I can expand on this, I can expand on this, because you think things so artfully and so and towards others. It's amazing. Especially because the last statement comparing humanity to how we're God, because the idea that humanity is in the very image / idol of God,
Right.
It's crazy to think about it. And so just hearing the verbal garbage of thought process is amazing to me, because I love that bit. So in terms of what you are a 3.
That's right. Yes, I missed that piece.
Yeah. To where, and of course, within this podcast, if you don't know anything about the Enneagram, that's totally fine. That's why we're here. With the 3, they can usually be very diplomatic and poised, and can occasionally be overly concerned about their image and what people think of them, and it can sometimes be very self-assured and energetic and status conscious, it says. Ooh la la. So how does being your Enneagram number affect your campus activities and different hobbies?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I mean, I think even thinking about, I don't know, I even almost have to backtrack a little bit by recognizing even how I defined how I think is helpful to use the Enneagram is really reflective of how I view like threeness, right? So as you're
Mm.
reading that, I'm like cringing.
Cringe. These are ooh,
Yeah.
these are my faults. Oh no.
Yeah,
When really
that's
they're
what it feels like.
when really they could be like quirks in a different view, you know?
Right. Well, I think it's like and perhaps showing my threeness right away, feel very self-conscious
Mm.
being in a ministry setting, and being someone who's like up on stage with a microphone or has like a very public platform, and then having people hear like, Kelly is a 3. Threes are very image conscious, and I don't know, think about the other things, and I'm just like, oh my, like that
Yeah.
doesn't seem like a good fit in some ways, right? It seems
Yeah.
very antithetical. So I suppose we might say like, how does positively,
Yeah.
I think that it is super weird. It is super unnatural to get up on a stage in front of 500 plus people.
Mhm.
So I do think that being a 3 does like help me preserve some sense of myself when I get up on the twee stage, because
Mhm.
that is not it's not particularly comfortable. So I
Yeah.
do think that sometimes my 3ness does help me kind of project that kind of
Mm.
energy or channel it in a more productive way, when it is in these more like forward facing, quote, quote, crowd facing
Mhm.
spaces that can
Yeah.
kind of be a
When
lifeline
everyone
of
is looking
sorts.
at you,
Yeah.
the champion of a whole university.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't just get to be like, don't, not feeling it today. Like
Yeah.
someone else take over. So I
No,
think
you
that can help.
you are the theological, emotional crutch of an entire school. Like,
Oh
does
well,
that put like any weight on your shoulders some days? Like,
just ask my chiropractor. Oh, for sure. But the one thing I remind myself of daily is that while I may be the one with the chaplain title, or maybe the only one with that title on campus, I am not the only one who is acting as a chaplain on the campus. And so that's super, super helpful. And
yeah.
again, I think, recognizing I hate telling people I'm a 3. Again, like I feel
Yeah, because it
embarrassed
feels like,
by
oh,
it.
I'm a Leo, you know? It feels very ditzy sometimes, I feel like, you know?
No, and that's why I think recognizing like what are the point of any kind of these personality sorters,
Mhm.
keeping them in their place so it doesn't start to feel like this astrological what's your sign kind of deal.
To
Like I
where
do think it
this
has
is
its own
like,
niche.
yeah, to where it's like a piece of a definition that I can relate to and
Right.
actually not use as like definition as in like more of an adjective and not as something that
Yes.
has to be integral to who I am.
Precisely. Or again, how does it help me understand a component of who I am? So if you're
Mhm.
thinking about 3 as an achiever, right? As
Yeah.
someone who is seeking success. Well, being able to then like more healthily define like what does success look like? Well, then that can be a really healthy thing
Yeah.
for myself or for anyone, right? So even
Mhm.
just that idea of saying, one way to define success is by saying, Kelly, you are the chaplain. You have to be the chaplain for 1,000 people, right? That's
God.
one way to define
Yeah.
success. Unhealthy, right? But by saying, Kelly, you are one chaplain amongst many other people who care about others' spiritual, emotional, and general well-being on campus.
Mhm.
How can you exercise that in the spaces you're in and equip others to do that well? that's another measure of success and is far more healthy, right?
Yeah.
And even just recognizing then those tendencies within myself, being able to then frame the task at hand in a far more healthy way, like then that's beneficial, right?
So using 3 as kind of like a platform of like, oh, so this is a piece of myself that I can build off of and get better at. Now, here's the flip side of success. One of the biggest fears of a type 3 is the fear of being insignificant or the thought of failure. Do you find yourself to where, of course, you're at the chaplain position, to where, of course, you, from everything I've heard, you've had like a very great outlook on it, to where it's like, I'm not God here.
Correct.
I am but somebody who has pretty good outlooks on things and is able to help other people have really good outlooks. And you're doing a great job.
Thanks.
And this is coming from the guy who didn't get rehired. She is doing a fantastic job. But how does the suspense of like the idea that I could fail at this, like how does that coordinate with your position and who you are?
Yeah. I think I'm always very it's always this fine line, I think, internally for me of recognizing like I'm always if we're gonna do something, I want to do it right the first time, right? And I would say that's the driving narrative in my mind. I wouldn't say like, don't fail, right? I'm just saying, get it right. But obviously, even in that, right?
Even in that, there's still that same suspense.
Exactly. And so I think for me, it's just being able to recognize like failure's not the worst thing in the world. And again, to think otherwise, to think that I can avoid failure, period. That I can control everything to avoid failure. It's doing exactly what you just said. It's to put myself in the place of God, which I know I'm not.
Yeah.
So I think for me, what helps me like try to kind of course correct that is to just try to practice radical humility in every way I can. Whether that's just being able to say, I'm sorry quickly, to say I messed up, to say that the systems that I put in place, whether it's like in relationships or at home or at work, like I know that they aren't perfect, that I'm just doing my best or doing what I think is most faithful in this time, to say things like, I don't know. I've just tried to really make sure that those aren't like bad words in my vocabulary, that those are always at the top of the list, and that I don't feel afraid to say them. Because I think even just recognizing those things starts to, at least for me internally, destigmatize failure, not set myself up for failure by putting myself on some kind of pedestal, and things of that nature.
So I got like 2 more questions. To where on one hand, how has, because I don't want this to sound cocky, to where like it sounds like you have like a lot together, to where like, and I love your point of view of it, to where it's like I can't control the failures. I can only do like the best that I can and like try for success. And also like, yeah. And part of me is curious, like, was there something within your background or within like growing up in Greenville, growing up in kind of the off-center Peoria area, that there were those like trial and errors until you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think some of it is just like you live and you learn. I'm a firstborn, and so I like if you follow birth order stuff, like I'm very, very typical firstborn, was always kind of pushed to be that achiever, even from a young age. And of course, like I didn't always succeed. And so I think obviously looking back now at just how failure would rock me, particularly in junior high and high school, yeah, I think some of it is just saying, like, I don't want to go through that again. What might be some other options? To obviously coming here to Greenville, I think college is always a great time to more fully develop that sense of self. So I'm not feeling like I'm just defined by what I do or don't do.
Mhm.
Um, and, so all of those things that I said earlier, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I'm doing my best. I don't know. All of those
Mhm.
kinds of words. The arena in which I have used those phrases the most
Mhm.
is within my relationship with Willem. So in dating him
Aw.
and in being married, right? I've never had to say I was wrong more to anyone else in my life than to
Mm.
my husband. So I do think for me, marriage has absolutely Willem's been a great partner, right? As spouses should be,
Yeah.
um, in helping to, cultivate more healthy, hopefully more Christ-like tendencies within my life.
Yeah. That's awesome. Uh, so the last. Oh, do I expand upon a thing or do I to where how when you because we have time, why not? When you talk about relationships, like how have you seen both within like your own theology and also within like your own personality of like,
Mhm.
oh, this person is knowing my faults and having me break boundaries. Like, how would you put into perspective that level of a healthy relationship?
Yeah, so what a healthy relationship loo
Looks like
looks
to
like.
you.
Okay,
Yeah,
just in
just
general.
just
Okay.
in general.
Yeah,
I always
healthy
pose like
relationship
20
boundaries.
questions within one. It's a
No,
poor
it's
habit.
okay. It's okay. I think most of the time, like, our questions unfold as we ask them. So it's
Yeah.
okay. I think, well, and you kind of gave the answer even in the asking of your question, right?
Yeah.
So, like, being able to put up the healthy boundaries to be able to stick to them, I think
Yeah.
is key. Right? Because I think part of, you would hope, in a healthy relationship, you're being your most um, authentic and full self.
Yeah.
And I think to be able to do that, you have to know that, like, there are those boundaries there,
Yeah.
that it's not this nebulous thing. Um, and I think it's ultimately like this idea of healthy attachment, I think is always big for me. So knowing that, like, when life hits the fan, which it always
Yeah.
does, not thinking that one thing will completely shatter a relationship. So being able
Yeah.
to build that solid foundation of trust, and humility, recognizing again that everyone is going to mess up, that relationship can withstand some kind of difficulty, I think is key. So those, again, deep
Yeah.
roots, if you think about the storms of life, I
Yeah.
suppose you could say.
Because I'm just speaking from like a weird point of like where I'm at to where it's like a lot of the times when I'm realizing slowly that starting new relationships with people and being vulnerable is like one of the hardest things for me to do.
Yeah.
And so like and because initially it was just like, oh, because part of me has always just had like a hard time figuring out like, oh, what does it look like for somebody to break down those barriers
Mm-hmm.
but also have it not be traumatizing, because
Not to
I
work
think a
on
lot
it.
of the
Yeah.
times like it's like seeing like, oh, this person is getting me to be uncomfortable, getting me to open up, but also like that can lead down a dark road sometimes, and it's
Yes.
like, and so I really valued hearing like, yeah, like having that good back and forth in a different way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, so I think I've been talking for way too long, and I think that's gonna about call it. Thank you, Kelly, for coming in and doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and hear more on the Papyrus when you can. This is the ABP Podcast, Awesome Blossom Possum, and we're out.